Hello, my name is Teddy Rycroft, and in this video, I want to talk about the future of education in our world and how our changing technology and society is going to influence that, impact what it means to learn, what it means to be a student, and what it means to be an educator. I'll start with my own experience as a student, learning in classroom settings, learning in the real world, and then my experience as a teacher as well, before jumping into my predictions and what I hope the future of education will look like. I was always a very studious kid and always did quite well academically and whatnot. I really bonded well with a lot of teachers, and I always put forth a lot of good effort. I was kind of like very book smart in that sense. But I also learned a lot of my current skills in non-traditional methods, primarily YouTube. I started music when I was very young, and my family members could play some instruments, but most of my learning came from online guitar lessons, online song lessons, online tips and tricks and whatnot that I acquired over the years. I still recall to this day learning the hammer on for guitar and playing the lead riff to Californication over and over and over. And I was like 14 and I was so jazzed about it. I'm 29 now, so I grew up in the era when YouTube was just being birthed and online content, online education was just starting to proliferate in the world. And by the time I finished high school and became an adult, I already had a very strong traditional classroom set of experiences, as well as my own experiences learning online, which I think inform my perspective that I wish to share with you today. After I graduated high school, I lived in China for a year and I was living by myself and working my job and paying my bills and doing all these things. And I realized, as many of us know, that there's certain lessons about how to live and operate in the world that are best ingested through real world experiences, through experiences with people in real world situations. My time in China was just like that. I lived in a small town for 6 months. I learned what isolation was. I learned what loneliness felt like. I learned how to construct a schedule for my week so I didn't feel aimless and purposeless. And when I moved to a bigger city, Kunming, in Yunnan province, I learned how to socialize with people of a wide age range. I learned how to budget my finances effectively or not. I learned how to make new friends, how to maintain friendships, how to carry on in a expat culture, for instance. I was staying with a friend of mine when I arrived there, and she was so gracious enough to open up her home to me and let me stay there. But I was quite young and arrogant, so I made a few dickhead comments that just belied my own entitlement, and she kicked me out. The pain and the feelings I felt following that ultimately led me to recognize how I was being an asshole and apologize, and we were able to rekindle that friendship. That was something I couldn't have read in a book. I had to know and feel and experience. During that time in China, I was teaching English mostly, so that began my whole teaching experience. And at the time, despite the fact that I had had so many great educators in my life, I always had this perception that teaching was lame or not cool, or particularly with music, if I did it, that meant I was giving up on my dream of being a musician. There was this interesting paradox in how I had such tremendous respect for my educators and yet thought it was so lame to be a teacher. My AP music theory instructor suggested I should be a teacher and said I would be a great teacher, which is such a lovely compliment. But at the time, I just kind of sneered and thought, that's so lame. I don't want to do that. Despite this, I naturally excelled at teaching, and I'm very good at teaching. I taught a wide range of kids in China. When I finished college, I was teaching preschool music classes in Los Angeles. And despite the shame I had towards it, I was really good at it, and I found such validation and affirmation in how I could connect to the children and connect the corpus of what I was teaching them, which was in that case music, to them, and be a conduit for that connection to something really profound, which brought them joy. I began to see the similarities and correlates between teaching, which I was doing quite a lot of, and performing as well. In both instances, you're usually engaging with a group of people who are there to receive something, whether it be entertainment or information. In both cases, you're constantly engaging the crowd or the students to ensure that you're connecting, to ensure that you're getting through, and you're making tiny adjustments here or there when you sense something isn't quite working. In both instances, I've experienced something really profound and awesome when I can connect to the listener or to the student and have them either really understand the story I'm trying to tell through the art, through the music, or really understand the information I'm trying to present to them. Here's another similarity between the two. There's different audiences that you'll encounter as a performer. There's an audience that's more into the pop music and you gotta kind of play to that. There's an audience that's more into the really out there, hippie, vibey musician stuff that's more my cup of tea. And understanding how to relate to each of those people will only make you a better performer. In the same way, teaching preschoolers, it's a different audience than teaching sixth graders. In both instances, you wish to connect to them and have them understand you, but the manner in which you do it is going to vary and it's going to be different. In my case, I teach English. These kids are still learning English. So even the way that I talk about what I'm trying to teach them has to be very thoughtful and methodical so I can get across to these students, get across to the audience. I've only just begun to really dive into the tome of information regarding education, including educational psychology, physical education, learning a language, memory retention. All these things I find so fascinating. I hope one day to become a master educator, and I'm not quite sure what that is. The future of education and what it means to be an incredible teacher is somewhat vague to me. And I wish to explore that in my lifetime and become whatever that is. Perhaps 50 years ago, the highest caliber of teacher would have been a professor at Yale or Harvard. I'm not quite sure that's the case anymore, although there's obviously a tremendous amount of work that goes into working at a prestigious university like that. I wonder what assumptions we're still operating under, considering the fact that we have access to all the information humans have ever known at our fingertips. I don't have a lot of answers for this section. I have a lot of questions. What is the role of the teacher when we can all access this information that they've ingested? What is necessary for us to memorize when we have access to all this information at our fingertips? How can this access be a blessing and a curse? How can we use artificial intelligence in a way that ultimately serves the students? How can we reform the educational practices we have in the States so the kids are better served? It seems to me like we have so much technology and so many advancements, and we're so interconnected, and yet we still have these vast disparities in education and resources, particularly in my hometown, Washington, D.C., where I know educators on both sides of the river, and it's a drastically different scenario. It breaks my heart. We are too advanced and too connected not to fix these issues in our lifetimes. Going back to what I said about performing in music and education, what would a kids' music festival look like? What kind of service could we offer and benefit could we offer at such a wide scale of people? I have this idea of like a children's music festival where the music's really, really good. Grammy award-winning musicians are performing there. And we have people reading storybooks and we have people doing PE class and stuff. It's hard to articulate, but there's something about that that really excites me. How can teachers leverage YouTube and online curriculum and online resources to create a class and create a learning experience that is even more effective and more powerful? It seems to me that online YouTube learning and traditional school classrooms have yet to really synthesize. And my intuition tells me when they do, it's going to be miraculous for how we can continue to learn and grow. What if anything, has changed in terms of what is most important for people to learn and understand by the time they reach adulthood? How does the relationship between faculty, students, and parents change now in this modern time? How could it change for the better so everyone's winning? I've had experiences in my class where there's always 2 or 3 kids who are struggling, and if I put all my attention on them, I could help them catch up to the rest of the class. But then the rest of the class would suffer. How can I use more tools and even create larger scale systems to where this isn't an issue? Is my judgment that they're falling behind because they're not as fast as everybody else in this class that just so happens to be of the same age an assumption I'm making? And is that assumption worth challenging? Like many other artists, I see a utopia in my mind. And the more I learn about teaching and the more I discard all this useful shame, the more I become impassioned and driven to create it and be a part of it. And it exists somewhere between education and storytelling and artistry and communication. I hope that in these videos I can continue to document my understanding and journey in this area, and perhaps even start to roll out my own curricula and educational content, all with the purpose of being of service to you and of service to the world. Once again, I'm Teddy Rycroft. If you've enjoyed this, really appreciate it. If I can be even more useful to you, please let me know. That's all I got for today. Thank you so much.